At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality walking shoes, which might lead to another discovery.
40,000 steps, baby. Who's on top now, Karen?
You've taken the office step challenge a step too far. Don't worry, though. Sierra also has yoga gear. It might be a good place to find your zen. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
When did making plans get this complicated? It's time to streamline with WhatsApp, the secure messaging app that brings the whole group together. Use polls to settle dinner plans. Send event invites and pin messages so no one forgets Mom's 60th. And never miss a meme or milestone. All protected with end-to-end encryption. It's time for WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone. Learn more at whatsapp.com.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Listening to this podcast? Smart move. Being financially savvy? Smart move. Another smart move? Having State Farm help you create a competitive price when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling, just another way to save with the Personal Price Plan. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast with Rich Ferraro.
Hello and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. I'm Rich Ferraro, and normally on a match day after the game we'd be recording a report on what happened in the game, you know, any talking points, this, that and the other. But let's be honest, events have overtaken us a little bit today with the sacking of Ange Postecoglou a mere matter of minutes after the final whistle went. I'm joined by Steven, Baz and the Maradona in the Midlands to discuss, you know, the reign of the Aussie. After 39 days, he's fallen on his sword. We're going to discuss as well what happens next and just generally what's the feeling like. So Baz, I'm going to come to you first because you've been an Ange skeptic, I think, and do correct me if I'm wrong, but I got the feeling that you wanted him to do okay, but you never were convinced.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly it. I quite like him. I like his press conferences and I like the way he carries himself. But
you might be in a minority of one on that one.
But yeah, and I've got more to say on that later on, I think. But I mean, I said it in one of the match reports. Is like we're brought up on build from the back and the clean sheets a point earned. So he was never going to get the same time that a defensive style manager like Nuno got when he came in, because as a fan base, we're used to that. And then trying to make that massive change in the way we play without a pre-season as well was a massive mistake. So I couldn't see it working. And then I've only been to the home games. So I've seen 3 Ange games and all 3 of them were utterly predictable. I could have told you the script 20 minutes into the game.
Yeah, Steven Toplis, you've also not long got home from the match, and I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Is it doesn't matter who we're playing or what's been going on. Every match has been the same in terms of how it's gone, hasn't it?
It has, and it's a constant cycle of Forest having some good spells. We create chances, we miss those chances, the other team goes up the other end, and we concede soft goals. It's happening way too often and was happening way too often. Something was clearly not working. And I think this today, Ange going, has been the right decision. Something had to change. It's quite funny because at half-time, it was a funny game today because I don't think Forest played all that badly. Got to half-time at 0-0 and you know, the group who I'm with, we were talking amongst ourselves who we all have season tickets together. And we were saying, we know exactly what's going to happen here. In the 48th minute, Chelsea are going to score. And look what happened. 48 minutes.
Yeah, that's exactly the conversation I was having with Mrs. Ferraro as well. And it was so, as Baz said, so utterly predictable. Now, Maradona Midlands, you're on to provide a little bit of devil's advocate, I suppose, because in previous podcasts, you've been saying, you know what, give it time. He's trying to implement something new. But I put it to you that it was clearly never going to work.
I don't know if it was inevitable, it was never going to work. I think if we managed to pick up a win, say, at Swansea, and then one out of Burnley or Sunderland, it would have just relieved some of that pressure off him, and then it wouldn't have become this sword of Damocles hanging over him and all the negative statistics of first Forest manager not to win in 100 years and all that sort of thing. So it just would have relieved the pressure. The crowd would have been a bit less edgy, and the players would have relaxed maybe a bit more. But as soon as that sort of winless run sort of starts again, so 8 games, and it would have been 9 games if we kept on for another game, and we're playing the sort of quality of opposition we are, it just becomes harder and harder. And the bad will after the Europa League game against Ludogorets. Midtjylland, sorry. Midtjylland.
We're not even playing Ludogorets.
Midtjylland. I said I didn't want him to go, but I said he might as well be sacked that morning because I thought it was deeply unfair. But the level of bad will towards him was so great that even if he won a couple of matches, the next time he lost, it would have been back to catastrophising, and he's at the end of his tether again. He's got one more match to save his career. And when you're in that situation, you just can't build a season. You can't have that level of pressure every time you play. That if you lose that one match, you're going to be touted as being ready for the sack any time. So as soon as that Midtjylland game happened, even though I thought it was a disgrace the way people reacted, and it just as from a human perspective, you can have criticism towards a manager, but to sort of rob him of his dignity like that, as on a human level, just for doing his job. Okay, maybe not doing it particularly well, but sort of trying to humiliate him like that in front of the world's media and turning on him after 6 games. I thought there was no way back really then. And he's had a difficult task. And I think Nuno had that same difficult task. That's why he was reacting in the way he was at the beginning of the season. He knew it was a tough task to A, replicate last season, B, do it with the Europa League thrown into the mix as well, C, try to integrate a load of new players, D, try to integrate a load of new players who haven't actually played in the Premier League and are fairly young as well. So that's why Nuno was showing signs of stress and distress at the beginning of the season as well. So whoever was doing that job would have had similar problems, but just the level of bad feeling towards him just makes it a lot harder. Somebody with goodwill would have had the crowd on their side, and if he'd gone 1-0 down, they were like, come on, you Reds, and all that sort of thing. With him, it's all of a sudden, well, that's it, we're done. So, yeah, he was on a loser from about that Midtjylland game, or maybe even the Sunderland game onwards.
Okay, and that's all we've got time for in this part. No, okay, so Baz, you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, I think it was you, Maradona, that said that it was just the Swansea game was like a sliding doors thing. But I met Steven before the game today, and when I saw the team sheet, I was like, actually, there was part of me that was like thinking at the time as well, is play Taiwo against Arsenal, because Arsenal's defence are absolutely terrified of him. And then even if we lose, but it's like a 3-2 loss because Arsenal's defence are terrified of him and it goes in off Taiwo's shins, then that sets a completely different story. But it's not going to be like that. I think if the only way Ange could have won it back after the Midtjylland game was to go on a streak of like 5 wins in a row.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen.
One of the things as well that you said earlier, Baz, is it's not necessarily about the result today against Chelsea. It was about showing that the match was not going to go the same way as all of the other matches have gone. And it doesn't matter what formation he plays, and it doesn't matter which players he picks. Well, maybe it does matter which players he picks, I don't know. But it just felt that the writing was on the wall because, as we've discussed, formations and players are one thing, but tactics are another. And the tactics were landing us in the same situation every single match, weren't they?
Yeah, it's only been 8 games, but the story was the same every time. There was no progress. There was no sign of progression.
Okay. We'll come back to some of that discussion in just a minute. What I want to do is play a little bit of audio for you. And this is TNT's reporter, Jules Breach, talking as the news had just broken about the departure of Ange Postecoglou.
Despite the fact that there was so much noise around this potentially happening before the match, I still think the timing and the way this has happened has surprised everyone, certainly down here in the tunnel and obviously here in the interview room as well. I was actually interviewing Morgan Gibbs-White about the match when the news dropped. So as soon as the interview finished, that's when we found out that Ange Postecoglou had been sacked as a Nottingham Forest manager. Now, in that interview, Morgan Gibbs-White said that Ange Postecoglou addressed the players in the dressing room and just talked about how frustrating it was that he can see improvements, the team can see improvements and progression, but they just weren't putting the ball in the back of the net and were conceding sloppy goals. Morgan Gibbs-White's opinion was that he still had full faith and the team had full faith that Ange Postecoglou could turn things around. So in terms of what the players might be feeling, I imagine that they might be quite surprised that this news has happened. Just after that interview, Gibbs-White was taken back into the home dressing room with the other players, and soon after that they were all taken up to the boardroom, as you mentioned, Lindsay, where I imagine there'll be quite a long meeting happening now. Just so you know as well, from what we saw down here in the tunnel, prior to that interview happening, Ange Postecoglou went into the home dressing room, spoke to the players, but then actually went down the other side of the tunnel area, and we saw him come out of there, and Edu was also in the corridor at that time, and Ange Postecoglou left with a bag on his back and went out towards the car park. Now, at that point, it seemed as though the writing was on the wall, but it wasn't until a few minutes later that that news was confirmed.
And I'm just going to stop a Jules Breach there because, Stephen, do you have a little bit of breaking news for us as we're recording?
Just as we are recording, David Ornstein is reporting that Forest have been in contact with Roberto Mancini about becoming our new manager.
Wowzers, that's come out.
What do you think of that?
Maradona in the Midlands, did you see that coming?
Did not see that coming, no. It's typical for us. You can either have the gruff Sean Dyche or the suave Mancini. They're both very similar candidates, but I don't know. I think he's been in Saudi Arabia, hasn't he, in recent times? I can't remember now. I've lost track. But
and Stephen, can you shed any light on that at all?
Yeah, he had 14 months in Saudi Arabia before leaving last October. Before that, he was manager of Italy, and obviously he had his time at Man City, winning titles and trophies here. So I would never have seen Roberto Mancini coming, but I can see why Forest might be tempted to go for him.
Baz, would you rather go for Sean Dyche?
When the rumours started about Dyche a couple of weeks ago, I was like, absolutely no way, absolutely not. But I've kind of been coming round to it. But I do think actually I'd rather have Mancini.
Maradona, would you rather have Sean Dyche?
I think I actually would rather have Sean Dyche.
I think I'd rather have Sean Dyche personally, but it's not about me.
I want somebody to come in and sort out the defence, stop conceding from set pieces, and then just take it from there. I think he'd work quite well with our squad. I think he's always worked with wingers, and we've got plenty of those. And we've got Chris Wood, who's worked with previously. He might even go 4-4-2 for all I know. But I think Mancini would just be another risk again. I think part of the problem with Ange was he's a gruff 60-year-old Australian man, and we've got a very young squad. So connecting with the younger players, I'm not sure. There's a bit of a generation gap there. I'm not sure Ange managed it so well. Nuno managed to pull off that sort of Jedi father figure routine with his very comforting voice and his lovely shiny teeth. And Mancini, I just think he'd rather be an aloof figure as well, expecting sort of similar results to somebody like maybe a Martin O'Neill, or saying, look, I've done it all in the past. I'm telling you what to do. Just do it. I'm not sure if that's going to work with a group of young players.
Hold that thought, Stephen.
I think the advantage of Mancini over Dyche is the fact that he's managed in Europe and the fact that he's achieved a lot in the game. You think of the trophies he's won, the profile of players he's managed. With all due respect to Sean Dyche, he's on a different level to him. And I think that would register with our players and they would instantly respect a name like Roberto Mancini for different reasons that they would Sean Dyche. Okay. So if I'm looking at it from the club's point of view, I think that's where Mancini has suddenly emerged.
I'm going to put forward a counter-argument here. And Baz, I'd like to know what you think about this. So I don't think that Mancini would be a good fit, because one of the problems with Ange Postecoglou is that he had the kind of ego that only a 60-year-old Australian, that kind of level of arrogance. And, here we've got a 60-year-old Italian who thinks he's the bee's knees. Famously, if I remember rightly, not only did he fall out with players at Man City, he had fistfights with some of them. And I'm not sure. I don't know if it's a generation gap, but I think stylistically, I think this group of players have shown that they respond well when they have got a manager who is, a father figure, or even a big brother type figure, as Steve Cooper did. And I'm wondering if Mancini's ego might be actually the thing that would block him from being successful with Forest.
Possibly. I mean, you also think back to some of the players he had at Man City, and then you think, yeah, maybe having a fist fight is probably the only way to get through to him. But I think in terms, tactically and stylistically, I could see it working. But in terms of how he approaches the players, and very vitally, and one of the advantages of Dyche is how he approaches the fans. Because one of the things I was thinking about before the game was, if you think back to Nuno's first interview when he got appointed, he said, the fans here love Steve Cooper, so I've got my work cut out to win them over. And we had none of that from Ange. He didn't even acknowledge the fans until the Midlands game. And I could also see the same from Mancini.
Well, and again, going back to the thing that you talked about earlier with the press conferences, the thing that really, really wound Forest fans up, we can put up with bad results as long as the players look like putting in effort. And people generally thought that, the players, they were trying their best to adapt to a new style of play, but it wasn't working, and the results were not coming as a result because of that. But you combine that with press conferences where he talks about himself. He doesn't talk about the club. He doesn't acknowledge the fans. He puts himself at the centre of everything. And that goes against the values that many of us as Forest fans, particularly those of us who are of a certain generation, think are massively aligned to the club. And Ange never felt like he fitted in that respect. No, acknowledge that.
I'd also say just our success since Steve Cooper came in is the unity on and off the pitch. The Forest are magic on and off the pitch.
Yeah.
There was a point where the game today went a bit quiet, and I was wondering whether someone would start singing something. And I was like, normally it would be that song, but no one's going to sing that because we don't feel that in any way.
I want to stick up for Ange a little bit there, because when he was invariably giving those answers, it was on the back of questions about, how do you think you will be able to do this? Will you fit in? And so it's hard to sort of give answers about we and us when he's been asked a direct question like that. And also, for me, it's not bothered me at all what Ange said in press conferences. I mean, it can be a bit fake, can't it? Because some of the stuff Steve Cooper
I would refer you back to the last two head coaches, and the thing is, like, many of us are still grieving for Steve Cooper because
it was all a bit too much, was it? It wasn't. I mean, he was laying it on a bit thick.
I think you might be in a minority of one.
No, you say either he's I can't remember
the greatest con artist in history, or he genuinely loves the fans and the club. And I think he genuinely loves the fans and the club.
Do we need
Steven, you wanted to jump in there.
That they love us? Do we really need that?
Let Stevens have his say, and then we'll see where we go with that.
When Nuno came in, it took him a little bit of time to warm up and really get the whole kind of vibe about Forest. I remember a few things being said early on during his tenure, that he wasn't really getting it, or he didn't feel like he was going down that same route that Steve Cooper did to really ingratiate himself with the Forest fan base. But that took a bit of time, and it came. But I can understand with Ange the fan feeling towards him, because, a lot of his talk in his press conferences has been, well, I did this at Spurs, I've done this before, I've done this. And it was a bit me. And I think he could have spun things around a bit better and made it a bit more of a collective answer rather than just talking about him a lot.
Yeah, I think the cultural thing there comes in as well, because he never had the chance to do a post-match interview or press conference after a win. And in that win at all costs Aussie mentality. And also, you've got to remember, he worked in Japan for a fair bit of time as well. And the whole shame thing of of physically displaying the sort of anguish and shame on your face and looking down at the floor and looking disappointed is as much as part of saying what you're saying as what you're displaying in your body language. So I feel a bit of sympathy for him. I thought that was a cheap shot.
I think Stevens pointed out there can be other viewpoints available, and certainly I think, bearing in mind how media trained all people in the game are these days, in those press conferences he should have the wherewithal to say, you know what, it's not about me. What's really important here is how we get the club back on an even keel, how we get the team firing, and it always started with him. Baz?
It's the same thing, the all about him kind of idea. Again, a contrast with Nuno, and this would be interesting with Mancini as well, especially compared to Dyche, is the first thing that Nuno did when he came in was he built the entire team around Morgan. So everyone was saying, Wolves, he played 3-4-3, he did this. And yes, it was counter-attacking, it was sitting deep, it was fast wingers, but he built the formation around Morgan. He built the entire side around Morgan. And you watch Morgan this season and he looks lost, and the team isn't playing to his strengths. And we were discussing earlier about what's happened to Matt Sells. He looks lost. He looks like his confidence is being destroyed because it's not playing to his strengths. So it's like Ange has tried to put a blueprint on top of players who aren't rather than trying to mould the blueprint around the players he's already got.
Okay. We shall come back to some of that in just a few minutes after this.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
When it comes to what your family eats and drinks, you know your choices matter. You're the expert because you know what fits your life. And getting it right starts with good information. That's why America's beverage companies are sharing more information about our ingredients at goodtoknowfacts.org. No spin, no judgments, just the facts straight from the experts for more than 140 beverage ingredients. Visit goodtoknowfacts.org.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Welcome back to 1865 as we discuss the sacking of Ange Postecoglou from Nottingham Forest. And we've just had a clip come in, which is from Match of the Day, where Forest skipper Ryan Yates has been talking about taking responsibility for the manager's departure.
Ryan, thanks for speaking to us. You've just come down from upstairs. What can you tell us about the last 20 minutes or so, how events unfolded up there?
I think just that we're all extremely disappointed with how recent results are going. But at the end of the day, it's down to us individually to look at ourselves in the mirror and try and do everything we can to change it around.
39 days is not very long. You must have hardly got to know Ange Postecoglou, really.
No, not really, but that's the nature of football. Results haven't been good enough. Us as players have to take massive responsibility, and collectively as a group, we need to do more. We have to look at ourselves in the mirror. We have to get on the training pitch. We have to look for them 1%. It's fine margins, and we need to give absolutely everything we owe it to the fans to put in a really good performance on Thursday.
It seemed to unfold very quickly after the final whistle. Did Ange go into the dressing room as normal?
He did, yeah. He spoke about the game, obviously extremely disappointed, like us all. And then I obviously I did some running, came back in, and obviously the news had been out.
Were you surprised at all, or did you sense it might happen?
I think when we've had such bad results, I think it's never a massive surprise. But like I say, that's it's really disappointing for us as players because we know we can do more, we can be better. Like I say, we have to dust ourselves down really quickly. We've got a massive game in the Europa League coming up, and whatever steps the club make moving forward, we need to be fully behind it. We owe it to the fans, like I just said, more than ever to fight for the shirt and give absolutely everything to change it around. And
we know the owner doesn't hang around. He makes decisions quite quickly, often. Today being an example of that. Mm-hmm. You haven't been told yet who's going to be coming in to replace him, have you?
No, nothing.
Steven Toplis, I want to just come to you on something there that, actually is not specifically about Yatesy, but obviously he was saying there that, as players, we have to take responsibility, and that's true. But at the same time, as I've discussed on many occasions with you and with other people on this podcast and in life, there's no point interviewing footballers, is there? Because, they're always going to say certain things. And Yatesy's bound to say, we've got to take responsibility for it because he's the captain of the club, and a club where a manager has failed after 8 games and 39 days.
Of course, and there's only so much that Ange can do. Once the players are out on the pitch, they've got to take their chances, they've got to mark their men, they've got to do the basics well. And for one reason or another, we haven't been doing the basics well. Now, if that's down to the players, if that's down to Ange, we'll probably never know fully. But something clearly had to change. And to come back to the point Maradona made earlier about we need to defend well and we need to just get back to basics, that's exactly what we need to do. We need to be difficult to beat again and stop giving the opposition such an easy ride, because even looking at the Chelsea game today, if we'd have taken all of those chances that we'd created, there was no guarantee that we were going to win the game, because we so easily were shipping goals at the other end. Every time a free kick came into the box, every time a cross came into the box, I was worried that the ball would end up in the back of the net. And I have some sympathy for Ange, of course I do. I think he came into a difficult position, but I wasn't seeing any improvement. And whoever the next manager is, they have got to get us back to basics and doing those basics well.
Maradona, I don't feel that the players are down tools, though. I think they were trying to adjust to something different. And, I mean, again, the risk of sounding like a broken record, though, what I will say is that it took Nuno, when he came in, half a season to get us defending set pieces properly, and then that seems to have been undone in the space of a couple of weeks.
It's just that first season we were terrible. Every single match of the day they were showing us how we should have been stopping this goal or that goal. And I remember saying, why doesn't Nuno and the coaching staff just watch match of the day? They tell him how to do it every week. The cracks started to appear at the end of last season, didn't they? Defensively, just the solidity had started to dissipate a bit. I think we're up to 19 matches without a clean sheet now. So it was a good sort of 10 or 11 matches before Ange even came in. And that West Ham game, again, was those weren't necessarily clean set pieces, but that fragility sort of reared its ugly head. So I don't know. I don't know how. I think it just maybe need Sergeant Major Dyche shouting at them on the training ground.
Yeah.
Do this, do that.
Yeah. And Baz, I mean, Maradona makes a good point. You know, we haven't kept a clean sheet since the beginning of April, and the last quarter of last season did fall away, alarmingly. But again, I think, you know, there's all kinds of arguments that could have been down to fatigue of the players and maybe team selection, Nuno not trusting other players who were available to him. But the West Ham match really, really stood out, and I think is still one of the worst matches we've seen in a long time, because that struck me as being a manager who didn't want to be there and a bunch of players who were absolutely bewildered by the situation around them.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, like the Brentford game, which is the one highlight of the season so far. I mean, I said to you, it'll be a crime if we don't keep a clean sheet today, and we didn't keep clean. We didn't. But I would also add that, what is it, 17 goals or whatever we've shipped this season?
Yeah.
And I do remember reading an interview with Ange where he said, I don't bother practicing defending set pieces. I've got more important things to worry about. That's the thing that's lost him his job. It's not more important than that.
Yeah, and Stephen, bottom line is that, you know, you can talk about us missing chances, and what I'll give you Exhibit A. So in today's match, Taiwo Awoniyi intercepts the ball, plays it through first time to Morgan Gibbs-White, who's got the entire goal to aim at. If he puts his laces through it, then he puts in a shot that's hard and low. Chances are he scores. Instead, he tries to side foot it, and he misses the target with the entire goal to aim for. That's the kind of thing that you do when you're lacking confidence, because you know that no matter what you do, unless you're going to score 3 goals, you're going to lose the match, because you know that the defence is leaking like a sieve.
Exactly. It makes everybody else's job on the pitch so much harder if your defence can't keep clean sheets. It puts pressure on your strikers, puts pressure on your creative players in the team. And I think we saw it a bit under Nuno, and it's continued under Ange. And there were more examples today where players were overthinking when they were in shooting opportunities. Elliot Anderson had one where on his left foot, 10, 12 yards out, should have just put his foot through it, left-footed. Instead, he tried to cut back inside, and it gave the Chelsea defender time to recover and get a block in. In the second half, the ball was pulled back to Sangare on the edge of the penalty area, and he dummied it. Instead of just having a go and putting his laces through the ball, he dummied it, gave the ball back to Chelsea, and you heard the frustration in the Forest crowd at that moment. And when he did have a shot later on, he skewed it over the bar, but he had the better opportunity early on that he gave up. So, yeah, that is a sign of a team lacking in confidence. I think you're right in saying that the players hadn't lost faith in Ange where they weren't performing for him. I don't think Ange had ever lost the dressing room or anything like that, but just whatever he was trying was not working with this group of players. And today was another example of that.
Maradona in the Midlands, you have said as well that it's better to be a lucky manager than a good manager sometimes. And, you know, Igor Jesus' shot, which managed to hit 2 pieces of woodwork in one go. And you were just saying before we started recording, it's like, all you need really is Ange to step on a rake in the dugout for it to smack him in the face.
Yeah,
with things like that, yeah.
Yeah, he just had bad juju. That's all it was. But at the end of it, I decided after that Jesus chance that, yeah, it's not going to work. He's going to go. He's going to go. That combined with Marinakis's empty seats, I think we all knew what that meant. They might as well show the picture of the corner flag when they did that. But yeah, he just, for whatever reason, the stars haven't aligned. There's just the whatever he did, I think would have gone wrong. He's had 0 luck in the chances we've had. Opposition, whenever they have a deflected shot, it flies in. We've got referees giving free kicks for stuff that we've never seen free kicks given before, like in the Sunderland match.
But Baz, I'm going to come to you on this one, because in all the years that we've been watching football together, we've always said that, actually those bits of bad luck, similar to what we could talk about here, they're often the hallmark of a relegation team, aren't they?
Oh yeah, there was actually at one point in the first half, I quickly checked like the live text feed thing on the BBC Sport. What's it? And it said, Forest are making all the chances here. They're just not going in. And I was like, that's every single relegation side report ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And do you think that Ange was unlucky?
Yeah, I think we've had, you look at the third Midtjylland goal, Callum Hudson-Odoi was clearly fouled. You look at Sunderland's goal, I still don't understand what Dominguez got that booking for. That gave away the free kick. All those refereeing decisions that cost us goals. But when the refereeing decision goes against you, you actually defend the free kick, which we didn't bother doing.
Mm. And just to come back to you as well about something you said a bit earlier and alluding to what Steven mentioned as well, which is to do with... So in your case, you mentioned about Morgan Gibbs-White and Matt Sells and about how they look diminished compared to what they were under Nuno. I'm going to throw it to you that, again, that sort of symbol of lack of confidence is also the fact that Morgan's been, frankly, fannying about way too much recently. It's almost as if, like, under Steve Cooper, he almost thrived under, I'm the main man now. I was in the margins at Wolves, and now I'm the main man, and so I can do things that make things happen. And he got that really good partnership going with Brennan Johnson, where they were creating goals for each other and stuff like that. Whereas, basically, everything he's done for most of this season has really not worked for him, and he's over-elaborating and losing the ball and getting himself in trouble, and then when he gets up, and this is where actually I'm going to be critical of him as the captain, rather than getting up and moaning to his teammates and to the referee, sometimes you've got to lead by example and get up and get on with it, and he's not been doing that recently.
No, and again, that's a sign of someone who's got no confidence. There's also the whole saga over the summer where obviously he gave that famous interview where he didn't look very happy at all. But you've got to wonder what's going through his head. Obviously, he's got the personal issues going on as well, so that's obviously playing on his mind. But yeah, the over-elaboration is someone who's desperate to make an impact but is struggling to do so. So he's saying, well, I know I can do these tricks, so I'm going to do them because that's the thing I've got. The one thing left in my locker that I've got.
Stephen, we heard earlier from Ryan Yates. Do you not think that, and actually the Newcastle game potentially proved the point, that actually Ryan Yates is the guy you need in these situations, and he's, is he better than Ibrahim Sangare and Douglas Luiz and Elliot Anderson? Absolutely not. But you choose the best team, not necessarily the best players.
And under Ange, I don't think we've known what our best team is. There's been so many changes. There are even more changes today. I mean, when Tyro Wanyu was on the team sheet at 11 o'clock in the morning, I did a double take and couldn't quite believe it. So that smacks of a manager who didn't have much of a plan. And
I'm just going to point out that we all agree that Tyro actually had a very good 45 minutes of football and added something that Wood and Jesus and Callum Mwendo haven't done so far this season.
He did actually, and he looked a lot sharper, and that was good to see, and hopefully means he will have a lot to offer still in a Forest shirt. But yeah, bringing it back to Ryan Yates, I think there were games in this run under Ange where he would have had a lot to offer. I think of the Midtjylland game. That was a horrible game, actually, and the way that Midtjylland set up. And we had an appalling referee that night as well. But just having Yates on the pitch, doing what he does best, getting in the face of opposition, making life difficult for them, I think would have maybe prevented Midtjylland getting the run of things how they did. Against Sunderland, I think he could have had a lot to offer. Again, another scrappy, not very nice game. And sometimes in amongst all this nice football that we were trying to play, you do need somebody like Ryan Yates who just pulls people up by the scruff of the neck, gets in the faces of the opposition. And I think there's a reason why the likes of Cooper and Nuno valued him so much. Doesn't seem like Ange had that same feeling towards him.
And even after 60 good minutes at Newcastle, he then didn't select him again today. Baz?
Yeah, I completely agree. Yates, we were crying out for Yates at various points. And again, coming back to the fans, I know Maradona doesn't necessarily agree with that, but it was quite noticeable today that there were various points where it was only Elliot Anderson who was turning to the fans and trying to cheer us up, whereas Yates would be doing that every single tackle.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And maybe it's also telling that maybe the likes of Nico and Morgan, who have done that quite a lot in the past, weren't doing that. Does that suggest to you, Baz, that there's a frustration at the fact that, despite the fact they're still putting in the effort, that nothing was going their way?
Yeah, I think like Nico, he ran himself into the ground today, but he looked, every time something didn't come off for him, he looked devastated.
Yeah.
It was like, you could see the weight that the players were carrying.
Yeah. Okay. Maradona?
I was going to say, that's probably a cumulative effect on Nico, because he's had a couple of bad results for Wales and the terrible run for Forest. So he's not won a football match for ages. He's on the end of it. Really.
Okay, still to come, we're going to have a little bit more chat about who could be the next Forest gaffer.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
I'm Scott Hansen, host of NFL Red Zone. Lowe's knows Sundays hit different when you earn them. We've got you covered with outdoor power equipment from Cobalt and everything you need to weatherproof your deck with Trex decking. Plus, with lawn care from Scott's and, of course, Pit Boss grills and accessories, you can get a home field advantage all season long. So get to Lowe's, get it done, and earn your Sunday. Lowe's, official partner of the NFL.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Welcome back to part 3 of this 1865 special. Stephen, earlier on you brought us the speculation from David Ornstein, and of course, as far as sources go, that's a pretty strong one, that it could well be Roberto Mancini. But before that, you know, we heard plenty about how Forest were sounding out Sean Dyche, and that obviously Marinakis has got a good relationship with Marco Silva and he'd be a good fit. We also heard about other speculation like Andoni Iraola. I think it's probably an open secret, isn't it, that Marco Silva, we're not just speculating, are we? Marco Silva, surely number one choice, but there's the slight problem of PSR and his massive buyout clause.
And we know that Marinakis doesn't go for managers who are in work at other clubs. He just doesn't, for whatever reason, doesn't want to do that. He's happy to spend X amount of millions on players, but won't do the same to get the right manager in to manage those players. That's up to him. So it does limit our options somewhat. And you've almost got to have a bit of luck with that approach and hope that there's a good enough manager out there who's out of work and who's going to come in and fit what you're trying to do at your club. Ange was out of work and clearly didn't fit what we were trying to do. So I think that's where this Mancini link has just come in. I mean, I was just looking at his managerial history and what's happened since he left Man City. He was last in work with the Saudi Arabian national team, and he left them last October. So he's not been in work for a year. He's not been in club management for a while either, because before that job, he was Italy's manager. Saying that, he did quite a good job with them. You look at the team that won the Euros in 2021, he led them on to an incredible unbeaten run of something like 35 games in the end. And when you look at what Italy have done either side of that tournament, that does suggest that he knows what he's doing with a team. And you go back even further to his time at Man City. I remember him saying something like, I like 1-0 wins. So he seems to be a manager that values defensive strength and building a team from the back, which we need right now at Forest.
Baz, do you reckon, I mean, without being involved in football accountancy, we'll never know, but is that something to do with PSR and amortisation and the fact that managers aren't amortised and players are, or something like that?
I have absolutely no idea, but it's obviously Ange's going to get a payout. Nuno's got a payout because he signed that contract so recently. So the payouts, and it might be that the way the payouts are structured, I read somewhere that actually there was quite a chance that Nuno's payout would have been an immediate one, but now that he's taken the West Ham job, it's going to be staged. So that might make a difference there. But it strikes me as a bit of a false economy when you're going to have to pay out the manager. If it doesn't work, then you need to make sure it's the right manager. So if that means paying for someone who's in a job to come in rather than gambling on someone who's out of a job.
Yeah. The other thing is, and we talked about this in our group chat the other day, in most jobs, even if you're essentially a freelancer who's taking on contracts, there's usually some kind of break clause, isn't there? And as an employee, every time I've signed a contract of employment, there's always like, there's a month's probation, or there's a 3 months probation, or if you're working in, I don't know, retail or hospitality, it could be like, if things don't work out after a week, then we'll go our separate ways. Really, clubs should go that way, shouldn't they? Because it'd save a whole lot of money. And like, it could have been a case of, you know what, Ange, it's not working out. Let's just part ways there.
Yeah, a 39-day probation.
Well, and this actually brings us back to another issue. So, Maradona, the Midlands, we sacked Nuno midway through an international break, which meant that Ange had very little time to work with the players, despite the longer bit of downtime. And then we didn't sack Ange in the international break and gave him this match. Is that bad judgment on behalf of the club?
Yes, because it was always likely we were going to lose this match. So, in that sense, either you trust your judgment and say we're sticking with Ange, or if you're having doubts, you have to swallow your pride and say we made a mistake and we're changing and giving the new guy some time. Also, the sort of thing in the background is the presence of Edu, and whether he's trying to, by all accounts, produce a global style of playing between the various Maranakis clubs. And you wonder what that style is. You wonder if there's a structured sort of plan there. So like Bournemouth do, when this manager goes, we're going to bring in this manager, and then the next manager after that, or Brighton. I don't know if there is. It just seems to be whoever's available at the time we're going to go for. You need somebody at the club there who thinks about it logically now and doesn't panic and just go for the big shiny name of Mancini because he's free, or Dyche because he's free and he's local. Just maybe take a week to think about it, assess your options, think how we want to play. Okay, we want to play an expansive way because that's how the successful teams who win titles play. But can we get there in one step? Maybe we need to get there in 2 or 3 steps and take 5 years instead of 1 year, which we're trying to do at the moment. But I don't know if we've got anybody in the club who's got the patience to do that, or the authority to stand up to Maranakis and say, no, you're wrong, boss. We need to do this before we do that. We need to learn to walk before we can run. So I don't know.
Okay. Stephen in a second, but first, Baz.
Well, I think, the contrast with Brighton is Brighton have a succession plan because they go round and use their data analysis on managers as well as players. So they choose a manager who is a progression from their current manager. Well, they will have like 4 candidates, and then they will interview those 4 candidates and see which one's the best fit for where the club are at that moment in time. But they already know which direction they want to go in. And on the same thing, the problem, instead of hiring Ange, we could have hired Oliver Glasner, because he would have been a perfect progression from what Nuno was doing to where we wanted to go. He was unhappy at Palace at the time. He was ready to walk out by all accounts. So that would have been a perfect fit for us. He would have he wouldn't have ripped up the playbook, but he would have moved it forwards in gradual steps. And it's such a shame that didn't happen.
Stephen?
Yeah, the whole situation, I think, has been handled badly certainly by Marinakis, but other people involved. And this shift in style, while I agree that we needed to do something after the way we dropped off last season, I think we've tried to do too much too soon. And Baz has just given a perfect example there. You had a manager in Oliver Glasner who was probably looking for a way out of Palace. We had a vacancy. He could have come in and fitted in really well with what we were trying to do, and we missed the boat. And we've ended up with Ange. I think we've probably done a bit more damage now than the longer he's been in the job. I mean, it was clear it wasn't working before the international break, so you might as well have just got rid of him then instead of giving him one more game. And if there was an out of work manager available, he would have come in 2 weeks ago and already made a start on what he wants to do at the club. I wonder with Sean Dyche, just to bring it back to him, whether the reason we've not appointed him, assuming we've been in contact, is that he doesn't fancy being a stopgap. He might be looking and saying, well, you know what, Forest are in trouble. I might save them this season, but they might bin me off in the summer when there's a European manager available.
When Marco Silva's available.
When Marco Silva's available.
Yeah.
And I can understand that from his point of view. Yeah. So I'm surmising a bit there, but I could see it from Sean Dyche's point of view, why he might not fancy the Forest job.
Yeah, I think it's hard to dispute that logic, and just also thinking about potential successors to Ange reminds me of, oddly enough, going back about 14 years, Baz, when Billy Davis left the club. And he was a manager who was like, oh yeah, it was all about him, wasn't it? But then we appointed Steve McLaren, and that was an Ange-style disaster. The next manager who we brought in was the massively heralded Steve Cottrell, who it took him a little while, and then once Sean O'Driscoll came in, it wasn't pretty, and Cottrell was never popular, but they got the job done.
Yeah, I mean, I've that's kind of one of my favourite periods of when we were rubbish. And and the reason for that is because, when Cottrell came in, it was awful. It was actually awful. But he brought in Sean O'Driscoll, and Cottrell did all the management stuff of ringing up other managers and ringing up agents and talking to people and handling money and all that stuff. Whereas Sean O'Driscoll sat on the training pitch and put the players through his process. And both you and I, we loved what Sean O'Driscoll was trying to get players at that level to do, because I thought he was trying to get players to play football the right way.
And speaking of O'Driscoll, maybe he would do well to, Marinakis would do well to heed his advice of not succumbing to your chimp brain. Stephen, so on that kind of topic, one of the big differences, of course, is that Forest had absolutely no infrastructure at that time due to Nigel Doughty leaving his position as the chair, and we had a very kind of skeletal structure. So Steve Cottrell had to be an old school manager there. Now, of course, managers have a very different role. They're not often called managers; they're often called head coaches. And as Maradona Midlands alluded to earlier, the whole thing about Edu, his role as a global director, is he having too much of an influence on the way things are at Forest? Should he take a step back to have that umbrella role rather than being hands-on at the Reds?
It's a hard question to answer because we don't really know how much of an influence he's had behind the scenes, because up until recently, Ross Wilson has been in position. He's now moved on to Newcastle, so I wonder if that opens up more of a space for Edu to come in, because if reports are to be believed, after Edu met with Nuno and was met with hostility by Nuno, he kept away from the training ground. So it sounds like he has been a bit in the background and not so involved. But this is the choice that Marinakis has gone with. It's his right to do that. He wanted to bring Edu in. He wanted to bring in this overall person to oversee his different clubs in different countries. And we've got to respect that decision. and trust Edu that it's going to work, because what's the alternative? Ross Wilson's now left the club. He was doing a great job. We really come on, and some of the players we'd signed under him and the deals that we did were great. And it's now up to Edu to come in and take that on. Any manager coming in knows he's going to have to work under those conditions. So it is, to repeat a former manager's saying, it is what it is.
Maradona the Midlands, last word on today's podcast goes to you.
Well, I was just going to say, I think Nuno's biggest bone of contention was that Edu was telling him about the style of play that he wanted implementing at the club. And it's a bit like teaching your grandmother to suck eggs. As Nuno, with all that experience in the Premier League and such a glittering coaching career, being told by someone like Edu, who's had no real success in that respect in the game as a coach. I mean, that's the thing that really ruffled his feathers. So he obviously does have that sort of level of influence in the club. He's been given that responsibility. So I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. It's a difficult situation. They've left themselves requiring snookers here from a position of such strength in the summer. They've managed to balls it up very spectacularly, very quickly. From being sort of hailed as this brilliantly well-run club with a great team spirit and going upwards, they've managed to sort of unravel that very quickly. So I don't know. It'll be interesting, but this has happened in the past before. We often take one step back and then two steps forward. We could look at the situation where Chris Hughton left. Very similar situation where it's predictable. We knew what was going to happen in every game. We had the Cardiff game in the weekend. We had the Middlesbrough game in the midweek, and we all knew that Middlesbrough, managed by Neil Warnock, were going to come down and do a right job on us. And it happened, and it was a little bit like that with Ange now. And they managed to pull the rabbit out of the hat of Steve Cooper there and did the unthinkable of getting us promoted that season when we were all thinking of relegation to League One. So you never know. Maranakis he's got more things right than he's got wrong. So let's trust him. Let's not be too hard on him. He'll be feeling pretty sore this evening, having lost all that money and had his sort of conviction signing as a manager go awry so quickly. Somebody who gave a nice award to just in the summer. So it's let's see what they do. I mean, it's interesting times being a Forest fan always. So.
Yeah, plenty of rough to go with the smooth. Yeah. And with that, I'm going to say a big thank you to the Maradona of the Midlands, to Steven Toplis and to Baz, and of course to you, listener, for joining us for this special podcast. Of course, once there is word of the new manager, we'll be all over that and we'll be coming back to you in the early part of the week before we, of course, bring you a match report following the Porto game. So once again, thank you very much for listening. And come on, you Reds.
You've been listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. Follow us on X, Insta, TikTok, Threads and Blue Sky, and listen via Apple, Spotify and YouTube. All the links are available at 1865.football.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
And Doug. Here we have the Limu Emu in its natural habitat, helping people customize their car insurance and save hundreds with Liberty Mutual. Fascinating. It's accompanied by his natural ally, Doug.
Limu? Is that guy with the binoculars watching us?
Cut the camera. They see us.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Savings vary. Underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates. Excludes Massachusetts.